Hey everyone, welcome to Thingcast number 6. Today is Tuesday, the 2nd of September, and it's just morning here in Australia. And today, the topic of the day is the Surface Pro 3, which I just had it charging here, so I've actually forgotten where I put it. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm just needing to turn this thing off. There we go. Okay, so yes, the topic of the day is the Surface Pro 3. But before I get into that, there's just a little kind of channel news that I had to take care of. Okay, so just as a special treat for everyone who's watching at the moment, we're going to do a pre-unboxing of this Amazon package because it may or may not be the V-Motor M100 in the correct color. So we will know right now whether or not Amazon made another mistake. So indulge me for a second. I just got it this morning. Obviously, I'm not going to do the whole unboxing here on the channel, but just want to be able to do this live. And as always, if you are watching this, this is a live stream. Oh, if you are watching this live, rather, and you can leave your comments. I will be answering your comments throughout the show. And what we have here is the V-Motor M100 in matte black. So looks like they sorted everything out this time. I will be unboxing this later on the channel, but now I'm very glad that I actually do have the thing that I ordered, and it means that I'm going to have to send back the other shadow-colored V-Motor M100 right after doing this video, basically. Anyway, hey everyone, thanks for joining. Okay, so let's talk about the Surface Pro 3. Now, okay, I've owned, and let me just bring up my notes because I had some things to say about this, but I have owned every single generation of the Surface Pro now. The Surface Pro 1, the Surface Pro 2, and now the Surface Pro 3. And I've actually never done that for a technology product, not even for like my iPhone. I did not buy every single generation of iPhone. And I suspect it's because now, oh, it's kind of just frozen on me, so I can't actually turn it on at the moment. There we go. I've never actually gone through and bought every single generation of a product until now. And it's quite interesting because by owning every single model of the Surface, I've been able to kind of get an idea of the evolution of this device and where Microsoft has been going with it and what it's good for and what it hasn't been good for. And what I can say, just like really plainly as a kind of broad kind of statement, every single generation of the Surface Pro has gotten better, but the Surface Pro, as always, has always remained and always will be a really kind of niche, geeky tech product. It's a beautiful machine, but it is really just a product for very specific usage scenarios. And I think Microsoft has been guilty somewhat of wanting to have their cake and eat it too, because they've made a product that is very much targeted towards specific users, but they want to market it towards general users. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion about this product comes from. It comes from this mismatch between what the Surface Pro is actually really, really good for and what they say that you can use it for. Here's the best way to think about the Surface Pro for anyone who is kind of curious. The Surface Pro, in essence, is a laptop with a removable keyboard and a stylus. Okay? If you cannot think why you would need the combination of a removable keyboard and a stylus together, the Surface Pro is not for you. It is just not an appropriate product. And no matter how much Microsoft improves on the execution of the Surface Pro, and each generation of the Surface Pro has been executed better, the new one is thinner, it's lighter, it's got a better kickstand, just physically it won't work as well for the majority of users usage cases as a laptop. It just won't work as well as a normal laptop if you just want to do typing or that kind of thing, or even compared to a convertible laptop that you can flip over and use it like a tablet. I mean, even you can get a lot of convertible laptops nowadays where you can flip it over and you can just use it like a tablet with a pen. Compared to tablets, it's still too heavy and too large to be thought of as a good kind of passive consumption device. They've got this down to 800 grams, but it is still, compared to something like an iPad Air or a Nexus 7 or something, it's still not ideal for just sitting back and watching YouTube videos or anything like that, not to mention that it's much, much more expensive than those options. But, okay, so to answer the question from Junus of between the Surface 1 all the way to the 3, has there been significant changes you've noticed? On that kind of point of how Microsoft has been kind of slowly kind of laser focusing what the Surface Pro is good for. If you think about it, there are only a few cases where you want a computer that runs full desktop Windows 8 programs and has a removable keyboard and a stylus. And those usage cases are if you're an artist, if you're a designer, if you're a doctor, if you're, any one of those kind of cases where that actually becomes useful. Because when you can remove the keyboard, you can start doing things with the Surface Pro that you couldn't necessarily do with a laptop. So you're able to hold it in one hand, and you're kind of able to, hold it like a notebook, a notepad. Now with the new stylus, you can press the button, it brings up OneNote, and then you can kind of write notes on the screen. And you can't really see that because of the exposure settings of the camera, but I'll just zoom that up so that you see that the camera thing has adjusted. And those are some pictures I drew earlier, just some random doodles. But you can see if you try to do this with like a laptop or with a convertible laptop that flips over and probably weighs about 1.4 kilograms, obviously this is more of a convenient form factor, and this is actually the best way to hold the Surface Pro 3. Previously, I found the easiest way to hold the Surface Pro 2, because it was smaller, the center of gravity was different, was to hold it like this. The new one, thanks to the new screen ratio, it's actually much easier to hold it like an A4 notepad, right? They've narrowed down the kind of things that the Surface Pro is good for, because they've kind of found what the niche is for this product. But at the same time, they're still kind of saying that you can use it, anyone can use this product. But some of the things that they've done with the Surface Pro, the Pro 3 compared to the Pro 2, some of the biggest changes are the new kickstand angle. So this new kickstand angle, it goes all the way down to here. The previous Surface Pro 2, that was basically the maximum that you could get on the Surface Pro 2. Now they've gone all the way to there. And you might ask, why would you ever want to tilt the laptop all the way down to this kind of elevation? And the reason for that is basically, if you're an artist, this is a really good angle, because it's exactly kind of ergonomically suited for how your wrist actually responds with the stylus. And it's actually, in this usage case, you don't want the laptop attached. You don't want the keyboard attached. You don't want your hands touching any of the keys. So you can maybe use the Surface Pro with a wireless keyboard, and you can use it as a graphics tablet and write on it that way. And actually, the majority of the time that I've been using the Surface Pro, I've actually been using it without the keyboard, because in this kind of kickstand orientation, you can actually use it on your lap, especially on the train, and it takes up very little space, and it's actually quite a stable kind of fit. Now, if you want to know what the difference is between this and a tablet, if a tablet computer, if you compare this to iOS or Android, this is full Windows 8. So Windows 8 will run anything that a desktop or a laptop computer can, and that's, I think, is something that confuses a lot of people, is they don't realize this is not a tablet operating system. This is full Windows 8. I can go right down to the desktop and run anything I want. I can run Steam, or I can run any kind of program. again, it's a system designed for, like, if you are an enterprise or a business user and your computers haven't been updated to have Android or iOS apps. You get this Windows 8 operating system. You can run any of your legacy desktop apps. If you have drawing programs, design programs, full Photoshop, full versions of Photoshop, of any sort of drawing program, of any sort of design program, all of them run on Windows 8, and they're not cut down versions, right? I find it incredibly frustrating when I use a tablet like Android or iOS, and you go to a website and the website is just not, okay, there's a touch optimized version, which is garbage because it doesn't do half the things you actually want to do. There's like some things that you might want to press, but the desktop version of the website is not touch optimized. So a lot of times when you go to a website and there's rollovers, so imagine your mouse has to roll over the menu and the menu drops down, that doesn't work on touch. Half the time the websites are built so that you cannot actually use touch to enable those menus because there's only a single touch. You can't do a rollover command. So again, if you need to work with like a desktop systems and full Windows, full kind of desktop websites, that's why you want to get something like a Surface Pro 3 or a laptop, because they will have general desktop applications. That said, again, this is not light. This is an 800-gram machine. It's light for a laptop. It's not light for a tablet. So if all you wanted to do was watch YouTube videos and you wanted to browse on the internet, this is not what you'd buy. This is expensive and it's not ergonomic in that sense. Okay, so that's it's a product that I think is very difficult to kind of pin down, and it's hard for me to recommend to people because sometimes you may not know what you can actually do with this, because it is a very versatile machine, but it is versatile in the sense that because it's quite unique, because there's not much on the market like it, it's hard to explain the advantages to someone because they're not exactly tangible unless your kind of workflow actually corresponds to what the Surface Pro 3 can do. Okay, so just physically, I'll start talking about the actual device itself, and then I'm going to start going through some of these comments more specifically. But just specifically with the device itself, the new Surface Pro 3 is a lot better than the Surface Pro 2 in that it's much more, it's lighter. They made the screen bigger, and the kickstand angle, the new kickstand angle, is really, really useful. The IPS display, as always, is really beautiful on the Surface Pro 3, and you have to have an IPS display on a device like this because when you tilt it back and forward, you need the same viewing angle no matter what. And in comparison, I'll just grab it right now, it craps all over the TN panel on the MacBook Air. The viewing angles on this thing are just really poor. You can see that color shift as soon as I tilt it. You can see that, right? Whereas this is just a vibrant display. No matter how I tilt it, you can get the same kind of color accuracy, and again, that's important if you were like sketching or something. If you turn off the rotation lock on the device, you can almost treat this in a drawing as a actual piece of paper. So you're going to tilt it back and forth, you're going to angle your pen, you might turn it around, that kind of thing. So again, it's a really nice aspect of the Surface Pro, but it has some actual practical considerations. Now, someone asked in the comments whether or not the 12-inch screen size is now too big. Actually, in some respects, it is now too big to use as a passive consumption device. So if I'm lying in bed and I have the Surface Pro just on my chest here, and I have the screen, it is actually now so big that it becomes a little disorienting. 12 inches is just a little bit too big to have about like this distance away from your face. It's okay in kind of like some scenarios, but it's just, I feel like it's a little overwhelming compared to the 10-inch display on the Surface Pro 2. But in all other kind of cases, I would not trade the 10-inch display for the 12-inch display anytime. I like this new display size. I especially like that it's now large enough that touch targets with your finger, even in desktop mode, are actually large enough now that you can still use desktop mode with your finger, which you found it difficult to do with the Surface Pro 2 because the interface elements would just be a bit too small for you to hit. Mind putting it side by side by a standard piece of paper. Let me just bring up a piece of paper. Here are my notes for the VSonic VSD3. So here's a A4 piece of paper, and here's the Surface Pro 3. So that is basically, the piece of paper is slightly taller, maybe. It's pretty much equivalent, so you can see that they were right in what they were saying about trying to make these two devices the same kind of size. Let me just go through these comments because I don't want to, they're kind of scrolling and I haven't seen all of them. Okay, so Jeffrent asks, and there's some questions about using virtual machines on the Surface. Now, of course, you can use virtual machines. I got the i3 4 gig, 64 gig solid state drive model, and that's probably going to be a little weak to run virtual machines. You probably want more RAM. There are 8 gig models that are the Surface Pro 3 256 gigabyte model. You can get an i5 or an i7 with 8 gigs of RAM. Honestly, because I'm not running virtual machines or anything like that, and what I observed myself using the Surface Pro 2, I dropped down to the i3 because I thought that that would be sufficient for the kind of workloads that I'll be doing on the Surface Pro 3. And the i3 and the i3 and 4 gigs of RAM, as you can see, it's still silky smooth. There's nothing, this is still, an i3 is still much faster than any kind of tablet CPU. So you're going to be covered for basic kind of performance. The only time that you're going to run into trouble with the i3 is you're going to maybe be limited in terms of things like video rendering, just kind of sustained loads, even for photo editing and that kind of thing. I don't think you need to go further than an i3 and 4 gigs of RAM unless you're working with a Photoshop file that has many layers that exceeds the 4 gigs of memory. Apart from that, if you're just doing basic photo editing, the only difference the i3 and the i5 are going to make is that the i5 will take 5 seconds to run the blur filter and the i3 will take 7 seconds to run the blur filter. That's the difference, right? So for the extra $200, $300, you are getting. The other thing about the i3 version is that the actual thermal load of the i3 is lower than the i5 and the i7, so it runs cooler to the touch. AnandTech on their review found that the i3 has slightly better battery life for light workloads and slightly worse battery life for heavy workloads. So again, if you're just doing light workloads, I mean, I've observed that this i3 model doesn't really get that warm. One time the fans kicked in when I was sketching in bed and I had the bed sheets along the bottom of the device, so obviously it couldn't ventilate properly. But apart from that, it runs kind of nicely cool and smooth. And I would say the i3 is going to be enough for most people. Okay, let's see about these comments. They're just loading up. Okay, so Andy Pandy says, I'm an artist and the biggest mistake Apple made was not using Wacom or Entrix stylus, but when there are people who pay their money, what does it matter? Yeah, there's and I think Medicine was asking this question about what is the difference between a stylus on a stylus on an iPad versus a stylus on something like the Surface Pro 3 with a Wacom or Entrix digitizer. The entire difference is when you use a stylus on a capacitive touchscreen, like on an iPhone or an iPad, that pen is just imitating your finger, right? It's just going to imitate your finger. And in many senses, the programs that are written for drawing or sketching or anything on iOS and Android are written with the expectation that you are using your finger. You're not using a specialized kind of hardware stylus or anything like that. And obviously, there's a level of detail that you can't achieve with your finger because it's a very blunt instrument. The other difference between a stylus, like a Wacom digitizer, and something like an iOS digitizer, is that with these kind of pens, you have pressure sensitivity. So when you press harder, it will, react more like an actual physical pencil or a pen. The kind of difference also runs down to the software, obviously, because there are dedicated software packages that are built around the expectation that people are using a Wacom digitizer, particularly a lot of drawing software like Sketchbook Pro, Photoshop has a lot of digitizer support, Corel Painter, all those kind of art programs. There's a lot of Japanese programs, also Manga Studio, which is actually a conversion of a Japanese program called Clip Studio. A lot of programs that are designed just for manga artists to draw comics and that kind of thing. So again, you won't find that kind of dedicated. It's like a console where there's an expectation of the kind of hardware that's attached, and in most cases, you're not going to get drawing apps that are particularly advanced or in-depth compared to full desktop level drawing programs, just because the peripherals aren't there. I have to say, I'm commenting on the pen itself for the Surface Pro 3. I think the move to N-Trig was actually a good choice. A number of reasons why I think that's the case. Okay, so the first thing that you have to know about the N-Trig, there was a lot of doubt over switching from the Wacom system, which had 1,024 levels of pressure sensitivity, to the N-Trig system, which has 256 levels of pressure sensitivity. But what you have to know is that when you have 256 levels of pressure sensitivity, you are only going to be restricted if the brush size that you are using exceeds 256 pixels. Because as you press harder, if you have a range of 1 to 256 and your brush size is lower than 46, then it doesn't matter because your pressure will map to a lower range than actually what the stylus is capable of. So at 256 pixels, if you have a 256 pixel brush, you could imagine there are 256 levels of pressure that you can push down on, and they will correspond each with brush sizes from 1 to 256. So unless you're using brush sizes larger than that, you won't run into any problems with 256 levels of pressure sensitivity. The other nice thing about the N-Trig stylus is that it now has the nib on the N-Trig stylus is now closer to the surface, so there's less of the kind of parallax error that you would get on the Pro 2, because with the Pro 2, the sensor that corresponded with the screen was somewhere further up the pen. So what would happen is, as you got to the edge of the screen and your pen was here, but the sensor was up here, the screen would think that the pen was actually around here and not actually where the tip of the pen was. So you would end up with just not being able to touch particularly interface elements on the edge, and a lot of menus and that kind of thing are on the edge, so it would get very frustrating. The new N-Trig stylus has a lot better kind of parallax error in that regard. And what I like now is that the new N-Trig stylus has a battery in it, and it's made of metal, and the weighting on this pen is much nicer. It actually feels like a nice drawing kind of device. It has a nice weight to it. The only thing I really miss is that the N-Trig pen does not attach magnetically. Well, it does kind of, but there's no slot for it on the Surface Pro anymore. So basically, I will end up losing this. I always end up going, where did I put my pen? Because it's not somewhere that I can conveniently store with a Surface. Anyway, let me just hit back to the comments. Okay, so AudioFile1998 says, I would never really expect mobile devices to match desktop monitors for color accuracy, representation, and whatnot. Actually, you'd be surprised if you read some of the results from a lot of mobile devices, because they tend to prioritize using IPS displays because you're going to have to hold it at different angles, and really cheap monitors tend to be TN panels that have really poor color gamut. So something like the Nexus 7, for instance, the Asus Google Nexus 7 has one of the most color accurate screens that you can buy on the planet. Just right out of the box, it has a really, really nice color accurate screen. So there's apparently the Amazon Kindle Fire HDX that apparently has an amazingly color accurate screen. I don't know, I haven't seen any of the results for color accuracy for the Surface Pro 3 screen. I can say that it is at least as nice as the Surface Pro 2 in that regard. It's a really nice display. I cannot get over how much of a nice display this is, especially compared to something like the MacBook Air. Can you even calibrate the screen of the Surface Pro 2 and 3, says Rohan. Absolutely, you can calibrate it because this is a desktop Windows 8 machine. So if you can run calibration software on your computer, you can run it on the Surface Pro 3. It has a USB port. You can plug your hardware calibrator into it and calibrate the screen. I've done that myself for the Surface Pro 2, but I haven't done it with the Surface Pro 3 because my hardware calibrator, I think, is getting a little old, so there's a bit of a green tinge whenever I calibrate things. So I try not to do that. Okay, so let me just read. See, the comments are loading in a little bit weird. I'm just basically going to just answer comments as they come in now, because we've gone into about 30 minutes into this cast, and I've kind of said my piece as far as the my prepared statements go. Sorry if this has been a little rambly, but there's a lot to talk about with this device, essentially. Oh, there's one last question. David asks, how do you find Windows 8? Do you prefer it over OS 10? I've had Windows 8 now on all 3 surfaces. I actually quite like Windows 8. I think it's good for some things and bad for other things. I still prefer OS 10 as a desktop operating system. I'm more familiar with it. The applications that I want to use, I find are better thought out on the on OS 10. But in terms, there's a lot of little things on Windows 8 which I think are really, really clever. So an example of what I think is great about Windows 8 is that, for instance, you can plug a phone into Windows 8 and use it for tethering, but you can tell Windows 8 this phone connection is a tethered device, so please don't download software updates over this connection. If you ever connect to this connection, please don't ever download software updates. And it listens and it will let you do that. OS 10 doesn't have any feature like that. If you connect to a Wi-Fi network, it just assumes, oh, well, I can just download anything I want and it'll just go ahead and do it. There's a lot of stuff in Windows 8 that thought about because they've made an operating system for so long, for so many people, so many usage cases, that there's a lot of fine level technical kind of detail that you can drill down into and change. And that's really kind of the advantage of, say, Android over iOS in the same respect. I really like, and I've said this before, I really love the hardware keyboard. I mean, the virtual keyboard of Windows 8. What I love most about it is these 2 buttons here. You can go backwards and forwards in your cursor position. So if you make a typo, all you need to do is press backwards and delete the key. You don't need to do that stupid thing where you hold your finger down for 5 seconds and highlight the word and then delete it and do all that kind of garbage. And I don't know why no one else has implemented this, because it is the smartest thing that I've ever seen on a virtual keyboard. And it just corresponds to the arrow keys on a normal keyboard. And again, maybe it's like a Microsoft thing, but I appreciate it so much to have that on a virtual keyboard. The other thing I love about the virtual keyboard is that there are modifier keys. So there's Control, and I can go Control-C to copy or Control-V to paste. I don't have to do that thing where I go, oh, I select the text and I hold it down and I wait until copy pops up and then I scroll down and then I hold down the button again and then I press paste and then, oh no, it went the wrong way. I have to shape the device now to undo. No, I can just go Control C or Control V or Control Z to undo. Like, it's what we've grown up with, I guess. But I think that it's still tried and tested and it still works well. Let's see what the other kind of comments are. You guys have a good dialogue going in the comments, so that's good because I can't answer every single question. Yes, there's a lot of discussion about hardware calibration of the Surface Pro 3, which is a very, very specific thing. If you don't know what hardware, if you're watching this and you don't know what hardware calibration of a screen is, basically if you do graphic design and you have a monitor and the green that you see on your screen is not the green that is actually officially what the computer is thinking, you're going to run into problems. Because screens can only, they can only output so many colors, and some screens are more limited than others. And if you design something around one particular green or one particular color, and then you get someone to print it out in a magazine, or you send it to a client or something like that, and they go, that's not the right color, you're responsible. You're the one who has to pay for that because you have screwed up. You didn't make sure that what you were designing for was as close as possible to the eventual output. So what a hardware calibrator is, it's a device that sits on your screen, plugs in by USB, and then a program tells it, it tells it to, for instance, if it was black, then the hardware calibrator tells the computer, show me what you think black is, and then the hardware calibrator looks at the black the computer produces and measures it with a sensor and then goes, actually that black is a little too blue, so what I want you to do is that whenever you display black, I want you to adjust it slightly so it's less blue. And it goes through every single color until everything matches up to some international color profiles. So there are international color ranges, sRGB, which is predominantly used on the web and that kind of thing for computers. There's Adobe RGB, which is slightly expanded in terms of color space. There's more colors in that. People tend to use it for photos. There's also Pro Photo, etc., etc. It's kind of design stuff that is not that important for most people, but then again, color accuracy also corresponds to the kind of color that you get when you're watching movies or playing games, right? Like, you've seen those TVs set up so that the skin tones all look, everyone's look like they're in a tanning salon, or their lips are just too red, or it's all just completely unnatural, and it looks really good at first, but most of the times it's just completely inaccurate in terms of color. So the whole idea of hardware calibration is to get you closer to what the actual data is encoded in the actual file itself. So for me, color calibration is a really interesting thing because I'm just slightly pedantic that way, but it's generally a boring topic for most people. Okay, so Daniel Hernandez asked, would you recommend the Surface Pro 3 for a person that programs, and also have you used the docking station? I haven't used the docking station that is available, but it's like a $200 machine, and I don't really have a use for it. If my monitor, which is my iMac, my 27-inch iMac, if it actually supported external inputs that weren't Thunderbolt, I would probably use it, but I haven't got the dock yet. As far as the programming goes, if all you're doing is programming and typing, don't get the Surface Pro 3. As I said, it's not. You're going to be better off getting a normal keyboard and a normal laptop with a normal keyboard. And I forgot to mention this, but this is the thing, that physically, no matter what they do with the Surface Pro 3, this is the reality of the Surface Pro concept. When you attach the keyboard, and here's the keyboard, and now they have this new magnetic secondary attachment, so you flip it up here, and then it attaches that way, and it's more rigid now. The thing is, the problem with the Surface Pro is that the weight is in the screen. The weight is not in the keyboard, so the center of gravity will always mean that the screen is heavier, and it will kind of tilt downwards. when you're using this on your knees, for instance, it's still never going to feel as stable as a laptop, because in a laptop, the majority of the hardware is in the bottom of the computer and it's weighted at the bottom, so it feels solid on your lap, whereas the Surface Pro 3 is still balanced somewhat on whether or not you can balance it properly on your legs. And it's actually been exacerbated somewhat with the new 12-inch screen size, because now the Surface Pro 3 is so big that it takes up huge amounts of room on your legs if you're using it with a keyboard. So if you look there, for instance, if you were going to deploy the Surface Pro 3 on your legs on a train, you see that it needs the space for your keyboard, but it also needs this space with the kickstand. If you look at a normal laptop, you don't need that additional space. You don't need that to actually balance. And what happens with the Surface Pro 3 now is that the kickstand, now the entire device is so long, this kickstand ends up on the edge, at least, of my knees. And that's not like, that's actually slightly worse than the original Surface Pro 2. The new Kickstand Angle is like the new keyboard. That's kind of stop. No, okay, all right. It's still not, you know, even though it's more rigid. The other thing about this keyboard is it's still thin, it's still light, and it means that it bounces somewhat when you type. It flexes somewhat. It still doesn't feel as nice as a good hardware keyboard like on the MacBook Air. So if all you're doing is typing, and you're coding or doing anything like that, I would say get a normal laptop, because the keyboard is going to be better for the thing that you do all the time, and the typing experience will be better. Again, the Surface Pro 3 is well suited for people who, you can imagine situations where you would want to take the keyboard off. That's really essential to the way that you think about the Surface Pro 3. It's a computer that you can remove the keyboard when you want, and you can still run Windows 8 full-sized programs. And there's only a few people who are actually going to find that useful. I find that useful because you can kind of draw on it, and you don't have to have the keyboard hanging off the computer, and yet you can still use full desktop drawing applications. Okay, so let me read the other kind of questions on the comments. Yes, you absolutely, just as a random comment, you do get black bars when you watch widescreen movies on the new 3:2 screen ratio. If you watch a movie, especially cinematic aspect, looks a bit goofy on this screen because you get black bars on the top and bottom. So Daniel asks, I actually just answered this question 10 seconds ago, but would you recommend a Surface Pro 3 for someone who wanted a traditional laptop? No, because you want a traditional laptop, and the Surface Pro 3 is not a traditional laptop. You are better off getting a normal laptop or even a convertible. Even if there are situations where you think, oh, I might want the stylus to write notes in class or something. A lot of computers nowadays, you can get like a Dell Inspiron X3000, I think it is. It's a convertible laptop that you can flip the screen over and use it as a tablet, and it also comes with a stylus. You can still use it to draw notes and do annotations. And if you're not doing that all too frequently, you're going to be better off using a normal laptop which has a stylus. The Surface is really best when you can remove the keyboard, as I said, and you can see why removing the keyboard would be better. So you can hold it like you did, let's say you're a doctor, right? And you have to tell a patient, oh, what we're going to do for this surgery is we're going to come in here, and you have a picture of the human body, and then you go, we're going to do this thing and blah, and do this kind of thing, right? And apparently doctors love the Surface Pro 3 and things like iPads and stuff because of that, because they can come to a patient and show them a diagram of the kind of operation or the procedure they might be doing, and then that puts the patient at ease, or it explains the process to them so that they consent to treatment. And And that's much harder to do with a laptop. Even if you have a laptop that flips over to the other side and you're trying to hold it like a slate or something like that, it's like a most laptops are like at least 1.1 kilograms. This is 800 grams. It's much easier to hold in one hand. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think I think I've been pretty clear. Like, it may sound like that I don't like the Surface, and I absolutely love this machine. I don't know how to explain it, but I really like, I don't mind a device which has really niche appeal. I bought a PlayStation Vita for the same reason, because I didn't, and in the same way, I love the PlayStation Vita. I think it's an amazing device in the same way that I think the Surface Pro 3 is an amazing device. But I think Microsoft has caused a lot of confusion for people because they've not really... I mean, it's fair enough if they just said, oh, the Surface Pro 3 is good for doctors and artists. They wouldn't sell many of these things. They would never recover their investment. But as a way of kind of demonstrating, the hardware quality that should be expected of computers nowadays, because the other thing about the Surface Pro 3 is this is a beautifully built machine, and I would not nearly love it as much if it wasn't just amazing levels of hardware build quality. And in many respects, I think that the hardware build quality and the innovation in the Surface Pro 3 is much better than what Apple does. The MacBook Air, this device has remained, I mean, it's a wonderful, it's a wonderful form factor, but this thing has pretty much stood still for the past few years, and I feel like there's a lot that is just clunky about it. The IPS display, I mean, the TN panel was terrible. This gigantic bezel, I mean, this is like from 2004 or something like that. Like, you don't get screens with these gigantic borders anymore. It doesn't seem right. It's still a wonderful device, don't get me wrong. The MacBook Air is a really nicely built piece of hardware, and I can't complain. I got this one for $500. This is the newest model, and I got it from an eBay sale from Kogan, and I cannot complain about that. But if you're comparing a $1,000 or $1,200 MacBook Air against a lot of Windows devices on the market today, unless you really value the included software, and the included software is really, really good with the MacBook Air, they are really overpriced. They don't compete on price anymore, because it's just, at one point the MacBook Air was a good value proposition, the same way the iMac is actually a decent value proposition. But nowadays there's so much stuff that's just old and clunky on the MacBook Air that it's just not competitive hardware-wise. Okay, so yes, the Core i3 version does not turbo boost. The maximum CPU frequency on the i3 is 1.5 gigahertz. That said, it's not a huge restriction. Like, as I said, the only time that you need to really turbo boost up. Now, the entire concept of turbo boost is that whenever the CPU can, it goes much faster than it can until it runs into a thermal limit. A lot of people have been reporting that the Surface Pro i5 and the i7 versions actually have a lot of thermal limitations. They cannot actually reach the top clock speed because the entire thing gets too hot and it gets throttled down, and the whole thing, it's pointless. You're paying for extra performance that you don't get a lot of the times. I got the i3 model because the i3 doesn't really throttle. It's actually not fast enough to run into heat problems, and the actual base clock speed is enough for my purposes. 64 gig solid state drive is not such a problem, because nowadays, I'm not going to put movies and things like that. You can stream a lot of stuff off YouTube, and you get, like, when you get Microsoft Office nowadays, you get 1 terabyte of cloud storage, which is insane, especially for students. If you're a student and you pay $90, you get Office for, at least in Australia, you get Office for 4 years. Like 4 years, 1 terabyte of storage for 4 years. That's fantastic. And if you really run out of space on 64 gig, there is a micro SD card slot, as people were saying in the comments. Apparently, it only supports up to 64 gig micro SD. That's what the salesperson at the store told me. Maybe they were wrong. But yeah, if I ever need more storage, I'm going to pop in another micro SD card. But it's unlikely that I will for what I'm intending to do on this, which is sketching, which is web browsing, that kind of thing, I don't think I'm going to run into any problems with the 64 gigabytes of storage. 64 doesn't seem like a lot for a laptop, but it seems like a lot for a tablet, so it depends on how you look at it. Medicine asked, why do I have the headphones on? It's because I was listening to music before this. There's no real reason why I have it on now, besides the fact that it looks kind of cool. Okay, so how do I find, Andy asked, how do I find the battery life so far? I think the battery life is actually good. It's about, I haven't really gone from like the beginning of the day to the end of the day trying to run down the battery, so I don't know how great it is. I get the sense it's about as good as this 11-inch MacBook Air. So they're both rated for about 9 hours of battery life. In practice, I get about 6 to 7 out of the MacBook Air. With the Surface Pro 3, I probably feel like I get about the same amount of battery life. It doesn't seem terrible. It doesn't seem amazing. But it's still more than acceptable, I think, for most scenarios. Okay. Okay, so I pretty much covered all the comments. But you know, that's basically my take on the Surface Pro 3. My opinion on this device hasn't really changed, right? Like compared to the Surface Pro 2 and the Surface Pro 1, this is the best version of the Surface Pro yet. It's still you know, it's thinner, it's lighter, it improves on a lot of problems that the original Surface Pro 2 and Surface Pro 1 had, but it still doesn't expand the market for the Surface Pro. I still don't think the Surface Pro 3 has broader appeal. There are so many other better options than the Surface Pro 3 if you wanted just to use a normal laptop or you want to do a lot of typing or anything like that. Those kind of things are more useful. And you can see, for instance, the Google Chromebooks have been taking off because people have realized that if I can buy a cheap laptop or I can buy a cheap tablet, the laptop is still more useful because I can type on it. Like to have around the house, it's not that hard using a laptop instead of a tablet to watch YouTube videos and that kind of thing. And at the same time, you know, I can type and I get all the advantages of having a nice cheap laptop that I can still instant messaging on, because that's what a lot of people do nowadays. They're watching something, they have their Facebook Messenger on one side and they're typing. That's what I do on my MacBook or on the Surface Pro, especially Windows 8 with the tiles. I have the Windows the Facebook Messenger on one side and then I have the web browser on the other. So don't buy the Surface. Here's the conclusion: don't buy the Surface Pro 3 if you want a tablet, because you're better off buying a tablet. Don't buy the Surface Pro 3 if you want a laptop, because you're better off buying a laptop. Buy the Surface Pro 3 if you want a laptop that runs full Windows applications and you can remove the keyboard and you want to use a stylus. And if you're saying yes to all those things, then I think you can already imagine how you will use the Surface Pro 3. You're going to use it for sketching or anything, but don't make up reasons to buy the Surface Pro 3, because in the end you're probably going to be disappointed. And here's a general rule of thumb that I found quite helpful when choosing to buy any technology products. If you have to think of more than one good reason to buy something, you probably shouldn't buy it. Because if you're thinking of more than one reason, it probably means you're making up reasons to buy something. You're making up reasons to justify the purchase to yourself. Most of the times, if you actually need something, if it will be helpful to you, there's one reason why you need it, and that one reason is good enough for you to go ahead and go buy it. Most of the times that's true. Like, you can go immediately, oh, I need this. Like, I can see, you know, exactly how that would be helpful. But if you have to make up a bunch of reasons, you probably don't need that device, as a general rule of thumb. So yeah, and the flip side of that, William asked, if the Surface doesn't have the stylus, you wouldn't buy it? No, I wouldn't buy it. The Surface without the stylus, the Surface Pro without the stylus, is the Surface 2. Right? There's the Surface 2 model, which doesn't have the stylus, which was basically the Surface, the Surface Pro, but thinner, no stylus support and everything like that. And no one bought that thing. Hardly anyone buys that thing because it's like an iPad or an Android tablet that has no apps written for it. So, you know, that's kind of the proof in the pudding. If you don't have a use for the stylus, if you don't have a use for the detachable keyboard, don't buy the Surface Pro. It's as simple as that. That said, if all those things are you know, attractive to you, then this is going to be a beautiful device. You know, you're going to love it. Anyway, yes, final question that I'll take is Junus asks, what do you do with the previous Surfaces you owned? I sold the first Surface on eBay. The resale value on those devices is actually quite good. My Surface Pro 2 I need to sell. And if you're watching this and you're in Sydney and you want a 256 gigabyte Surface Pro 2 that's used, and I'm probably selling it for about $850, including the keyboard and the cover, give me a buzz, give me a yell, and I can work something out with you. But yeah, the resale value on the Surface devices is actually quite good because the brand recognition is quite high. So no, the Surface R2 was the first generation Surface, and then there's the Surface 2. There's the Surface Pro 2 and the Surface 2, and the Surface 2 was the next generation of the Surface RT. And there might be a Surface 3 one day, I'm not sure, but I know I'm not Microsoft, so I can't. Yes, and if I still have my Pro 2, by the time I do my Surface Pro 3 review, I will have both in a side-by-side comparison. But if you are trying to toss up between the Surface Pro 2 and the Surface Pro 3, again, if it's useful to you, get the Surface Pro 3. It's a better option than the Surface Pro 2. Just the lower weight alone is a better idea. Anyway, that is about it for today's Thingcast. It's been a pleasure having you. If you are watching this not live, if you're watching this after it has been uploaded after this Thingcast, leave a comment anyway. I will still respond to those. Thanks for joining in, and see you guys later. Bye.